Hello, I'm Jane Ryan and I'm here today to introduce an intergenerational project that we hope will involve grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren, everybody in the family in a knitting and a crochet project. The idea is that everybody's going to knit a square, a very plain square or a colourful square if you can manage it, and they'll be put together to produce a big long blanket that represents South Lanarkshire coming out of the lockdown year. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to give you a few basic instructions and I think you'll find it very easy. So crochet is a completely different animal. We're only using one crochet tool here. Now a crochet tool is a bit metal with a little flat area, which is where you can hold your thumb. It's also the little flat area here also tells you what the gauge of your crochet hook is. This one we're working with is 4mm, which again is really good for double knitting wool. So crochet hook has a little flat area and then it has a hook at the end. Now the wonderful thing about crochet is that it is very fast, and also it only actually uses one stitch to do some very complicated looking things. The wonderful thing again about crochet is that once you learn a couple of stitches, then you just follow a pattern and it does it for you. You don't have to overthink it. So once again, when we're crocheting, and I'm right-handed, is make what we call a slip stitch. So that's a circle and just pull some wool through it there, and that's your stitch here. So with the crochet hook, when you've got the slip stitch that we've made and we've put it onto the crochet hook, the important thing to remember is that if that's not too tight, you should be able to see that there's space underneath that stitch. Now that's important, because if you have your stitches too tight on the hook, then you're not going to be able to get the next stitch through there. Right, so the process for doing this is that you hold the wool that's attached to the ball like this, and instead of you wrapping round with your hand, because you're not knitting this time, you're crocheting, so that means that the crochet hook's doing all the work. So you can see that I'm holding this tight as well with these fingers. So I'm going in front and wrapping that round. Now at this point, and it's always very difficult, the most difficult part of crocheting is the cast on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide both the slip stitch and the wrap towards the end of the crochet hook. And as I'm doing so, if you notice, I'm ever so slightly turning the crochet hook towards me, but not all the way down, not to here, just to the side, like a quarter circle. And as that happens, you can see it catches the wrap, and as I pull it through, I then now turn it a little bit more, and the crochet hook will go through the bottom of the first stitch and come up as an identical stitch. So it's what we call a chain stitch. So the same again, you're taking the crochet hook, wrapping it, the wool round it, twist it towards you, like that, a quarter. Start pulling it, and as you do, turn it so that it's facing down the way and through there. And you'll already see that you've got this, you've already got 2 stitches made of a chain. So it relies, when you're doing when you're first doing the chain, it relies entirely on trying to keep some tension on this end piece of yarn that's dangling there. So round. Again, what I do is I hold everything with my thumb at this stage, like that. Crochet hook turn, under, up. If I'm holding all that first stitch with my thumb, then it means it's not going anywhere, it's not getting any tighter. And through. Now, when it starts to get a bit longer, I don't have to hold the tail end with these anymore. I can actually hold it, start holding it with my other hand. Like that. And if you can see again, what I'm doing is I turn it and it goes through the stitch. And you can see I've got a chain stitch happening here. I should just, you can see that once you get the hang of it, and you will, you think you might not, but you will. Left-handed people, sometimes a wee bit tricky. But you will find that you get the hang of it. And very quickly you'll be able to produce a chain stitch. So if we have a look at the chain stitch, which is usually called the foundation chain, then you'll notice that the right side, it's almost like a herringbone stitch. You've got quite an obvious V shape that makes a chain. If you turn it round, you can see that there is a kind of bobbly stitch running through the top of it. So that's how you tell the difference between the back of the stitch and the front of the stitch. And we'll be working into the front of the stitch. And when I say what we're working into the front of the stitch, what we're doing is we're going to be putting the crochet hook right through the centre of these stitches. When we're going to create the second row of crochet, what we're going to do is you'll be able to see where the stitch that's on the needle, the hook, comes from, and it comes from the stitch before that. So you want to ignore that one and ignore the next one and go into the third stitch down. So there you go. I'm actually just going straight through the middle of that stitch because there's nowhere else for me to go. And then do the same thing again, which is crochet hook under, pull, and now what you do is you've ended up with 2 stitches, wrap round the third one as we've been doing, and you'll still see here, if you're keeping this nice and loose, you'll see that now these stitches that are on are nice and loose. They've got lots of space underneath them. If I pull that through, I can go through 2 at the same time. Okay, so that's us created what we call a double crochet. Right, let's try that again. So what we're doing is we're going into the middle of the chain next to the one we've done. We're picking up the wool. We've got 2 stitches, but we need to make that one. So crochet hook goes round. That means we've got a piece of the wool that's wrapped round it. Bring it towards you, turn the hook until it pulls through there. And there we've got number 2. So I finished that stitch. You can see this is quite stretched. That's because we've been working. This hole here was the stitch, the chain stitch that we were working into. So it does get a bit stretched. So the next one, you can see there's a wee space here. That's the one we're going into. So you put the crochet hook through the stitch, pick up the wool. That means you've got 2 on. Put your crochet hook under so that you've got a wrap. Bring it towards you, so you like that, bring it towards you, and then turn it down, and that'll come through the 2 stitches. And you've got another one, and you keep going. Now, I know you won't believe me, but the more you practice this, the faster you get, and crochet is extremely fast and incredibly satisfying. And when you make an error with it, it's very, very easy to take back. So into the chain, pull it through, 2 stitches on. At this point you can just grab the wool, pull it through. And again, don't worry how clumsy you think it feels, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you understand how the stitches are made, and then, you know, as you're working on it, you'll find that you get your own sort of style of holding it. So there you go, we've got, that's got the second row. Now I'm going to quickly do a third row and a fourth row to show you how much it grows. So once you've got to the end of a row with crochet, then really all you're doing is you're just going back the way and starting again. However, if we just immediately went back the way to do that, then we haven't added a little bit of height. So the best way to think about it is that this is a brick wall, and you've laid the bricks along here. We're now going to lay the next row of bricks, but we need to get the first brick in the right place. Now the first brick needs a bit of height. So what to do is chain stitch 2 stitches up. So it's just exactly the same as you were doing when you did the foundation chain. Wrapping round like that. Then you turn it round and work into the next stitch in. Oh, and look, you see how clumsy that is? That's just, doesn't matter. So I've gone in through, I've got 2 on, through. And from now on, what will happen is you'll find that everything gets a little bit clearer in terms of where your stitches go. Right, so we're going through, picking up 2 stitches, wrap it round, pull it through. Now again, you're going to make loads and loads of mistakes, right? And it's going to look very, very odd, but you will get it. You will absolutely get it. And once you do get it, it's an absolute joy. It's an absolute joy, right? So we're going to the end here, going to the last one. Same again. A double stitch. Now sometimes what happens is that you get to the end and it might look as if that's hanging out a little bit more. What you can do is you can actually, if you think that by not having a stitch here that your fabric's going to go in the way, is what you can do is you can actually catch a spare stitch at the end of the previous row and pull that through both. Crochet 2. There you go. Turn into the next stitch, and as it grows, the easier it gets. Now, when you're going into a stitch, what you're actually doing is, if you look at the fabric from there, you can see that lying on top, when it gets to about 2 or 3 rows in, you can actually see a kind of herringbone V shape going up there. Now these are your stitches. If you go in through that, under that stitch, you'll see it almost looks like you've done 2, but you're on the right. You're doing it correctly, if you can see that. And just keep going through to the end. On a double crochet. So the stitch that I'm using here is called a treble stitch, and the difference between the one that I've just shown you and this one is that before I go into the stitch, I actually wrap round once before I go in. And the difference that makes in crochet is the height of the stitch. So you'll see that the height of this stitch it's tall enough that you can get quite an obvious space in between. I'm using this is an example of just how to identify the stitch you're going into, and also how you're going to finish off at the end. So again, if I was doing, what I'm doing is I'm doing a treble here. So what I'm doing is I'm winding it round once, putting it through, picking it up, and I've got 3 on, so I take off 2, and then I take off another 2. So you can see that it's all the same kind of idea. When I came to the end of this, I would do exactly the same thing as I do with knitting. I'm exaggerating here, but I would make sure that I had enough of the last stitch, and then I would cut about there, and then take that through and pull it, and that would secure the end. And once you've knitted or crocheted, say for instance a square, then you might find that at the end you'll have lots of, where you've done a colour change, you'll have lots of ends. Make sure that you don't cut these too close. You want them to be long enough that you can thread a wool needle comfortably in, and that it can turn, and then you just feed it through the stripes. So that's what's happened here, and you can't see where they are. They've completely disappeared. But whatever you do, don't cut them into there, because what will happen is that stitch will fray. It won't rattle down, but you'll get lots of really unattractive little bits of wool coming out. Long piece, and then sewn in, and that's the finish. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We've just covered the very, very basics of starting to crochet, but please bear in mind that the technique or the style that you work in is not as important as actually just getting the stitches on. Very soon you'll be producing lots of squares, and then hopefully you'll be able to get involved in the project where we're going to make a big blanket that's going to celebrate South Lanarkshire's coming out of lockdown. So thanks very much for watching.